a former three-time MLB All-Star and a current analyst at the MLB Network, Dan Plesac.
Jason, if you want to do this again, postseason edition, you have my number. You call me, we'll get that done.
Ladies and gentlemen, you saw the intro, you've heard the countdown, you've seen it all over this channel, whether it's been on my social media or posts on this channel advertising it. It's one of our fan favorite guests joining us today. MLB opening day is in 2 days. No better person to have on to preview it than MLB Network analyst Dan Plesac. Dan, welcome to the show, man. Thanks for joining us.
It seems like we just did the World Series recap show, the pre-World Series. You know, it was a long winter, Chase, but you know what? I'm happy to have baseball in about 48 hours. I know you're fired up, and so am I.
I'm so excited. It really doesn't feel like that long ago. I feel like the season ended. We got to hit the free agency period, and then spring training has kind of felt like a blink to me. It's just everything's gone so long and so quick at the same time, depending on which fan base you cheer for. Dan, we're so happy to have you on. We were talking before. What's up? What has the audience missed out of Dan Plesac the past few months?
Well, I'll tell you what. I took a little bit of time off, Chase. I get the month of January off. I went down to Florida, played golf 28 out of 32 days. Spent a couple of weeks out in Arizona with my family, went out to the Waste Management Golf Tournament, got back around the second week of February. Been working in the studio pretty much Monday through Friday, and ready to get things started on Thursday for real.
It will be a lot of fun. I mean, you love the spring training games, but at some point, you were kind of mentioning it before the show. It's like, all right, let's get to MLB baseball.
Yeah, you know what's been really kind of cool? If there are any Met fans out there, man, I just can't believe, the Juan Soto signing for the $700 million plus.
Crazy.
The starting rotation taking a couple of hits with Montas and Sean Manaea. But I don't know. Things are looking good for the Mets. Yankees have had some unfortunate injuries, Garrett Cole being, the unfortunate injury. But it should be an exciting year of baseball here around the New York metro area anyway.
It 100% will, and we're going to break down, as I like to call it, kind of the subway trade-off with Clay Holmes and Juan Soto going to the Mets, and then the Yankees kind of getting other assets, but the injuries. It's kind of been a chaotic offseason. I feel like this year more than ever, we don't really know who the top teams are going to be. It feels like there's a lot of just unpredictability that's going into this MLB season, and I think that's what is going to make it so exciting. Now, we are talking about MLB baseball. 2 games have already technically been played, though, in the Tokyo series between the Dodgers and the Cubs. The reigning champion Los Angeles Dodgers are 2-0. What have you liked from them thus far, or what do you think they can continue from that Tokyo series?
I mean, listen, if you have any plans of beating the Dodgers in the West, Mookie Betts right now has an illness. He's lost 20 pounds in the last 2 weeks. He hasn't really been active since Tokyo. It's really hard to look past the Dodgers in the West, and I think in reality, they're so good. I know they take a lot of shots. A lot of people are like, hey, they spend a lot of money, and yes, they do, but they put their money where their mouth is, right? When you go out and sign Ohtani, you go out and sign Blake Snell, you have Betts, you have Freeman. They bring back Kiki Hernandez. They're just the best constructed team. They're the team right now that's probably the best equipped that can handle some injuries. The 2 games in Chicago, think about it. They beat the Cubs 2 days in a row without Betts, without Freeman. Really solid bullpen. Tanner Scott, another guy they signed as a free agent to bolster down that 9th inning. They have so many weapons that they can get to you. Banda's really good out of the back end of the bullpen, a lefty. They have the other lefty, Vesia, who's really good. It's really hard to pick apart the Dodgers. I think on paper right now, they're far and away the best team. When I look at the National League, I think there's still one team that can knock them off. I don't think it's in the West. I like the Phillies. I love their starting pitching. A couple of years, 2023, 2024 last year, disappointing ends to their season. Realmuto is a free agent at the end of the year, and you kind of get that feeling. I don't want to say that the Phillies' window is closing, but you kind of get that feeling, like that feeling of them being one of those superpower teams. It kind of feels like it's now or never for the Phillies.
Yeah, it
I think
does.
they're going to win I think they're going to win the East. The Dodgers should win the West. The Central, completely up for grabs. You could make a case. The sexy pick are the Reds with their great young position players. You bring Terry Francona out of retirement to manage. The Cubs will be better. The Brewers will be better. The Pirates starting pitching. Really the only team in that division that you look at and you're like, well, I just don't know. You know, with Milwaukee losing Willie Adames and trading Devin Williams, will they be able to do anything? I think the surprise team is the Cardinals. It seems like the Central has gone through the Cardinals the last dozen years. They feel like they're in a reboot mode. I don't think the Cardinals will win the Central. I'll be shocked if they do. They're probably a 500 team, but the Central, to me, in the NL is up for grabs.
I think the best way to describe the NL Central right now, just based on what I've known about these teams, what they did in the offseason, I think it's teams that have a very low ceiling but a very high floor, if that makes sense. Yes. I don't think you're going to see a team from the NL Central have one of the worst records in the MLB, but at the same time, I don't see anyone from the NL Central going and contending for a World Series, and I think that's kind of a key thing.
The only team in that division, Chase, that kind of, I don't want to say disappointed me because it's not your money and my money, but the Pirates have such a good young starting rotation. I would have liked to have seen them go out and get an impact bat, a guy that can make a difference. They're hoping this is the year that Brian Hayes, starts to do something with the bat. They're going to run production is going to be difficult for them to come by. I don't know if they're going to be able to score enough runs. Paul Skeens, we talk about him ad nauseum on MLB Network, best young pitcher I've seen. I think he's the best college pitcher to come out since Tom Seaver came out of USC. That's saying a lot because Steven Strasburg was really good with the Nationals when he came out of San Diego State. There's some positives if you're a Pirate fan, but there's also the negative. Are they going to be able to score enough runs? I don't think they will.
We're going to get to that. We're going to get to some other teams as well. I love Paul Skeens. I think the way he plays the game, and I just feel like he's like, what I love about him is just like he came in and it felt like he was living the dream life for a few months. Like came on, rookie of the year type, a starter in the All-Star game, ran through the minor leagues like it was some joke. Like it just felt like he was kind of living like the dream life. He's just such a fun player to cheer for.
Yeah, he is. And when you think about it, he started off at Air Force, right? Not a perennial power you think in college baseball. Played a little catcher and was a pretty good hitter. And then he made the switch. LSU grabbed him up. He went to LSU, put the catching gear away, concentrating on pitching, and the rest is history. You could make a legitimate case. He's one of the favorites to win the NL Cy Young. My sexy pick is Corbin Burns. I know that disappointed you. The Orioles couldn't keep him.
I still love Corbin Burns. Oh
yeah, I'm a big Corbin Burns fan. I mean, he goes deep into games. He had a little pocket last year in August that the wheels fell off. Zach Eflin kind of saved, in my opinion, the Orioles season. He was really the lone reliable starter they had for a few weeks. But I really think Burns is going to help the D-backs. I don't think they can win the West, but they're definitely a wild card threat with Zach Gallen in that starting rotation also. I mean, they've got a chance. Merrill Kelly is a really good pitcher too. So the Diamondbacks are going to be pretty good.
I think so as well. They're kind of one of my sleeper teams from the offseason. I love the Corbin Burns signing, as you just said, pairing him with Zach Gallen. And then I think Corbin Carroll, he had such a great rookie year, kind of fell, I don't want to say fell off a cliff, but I think disappointed expectations last year. I think he'll have a bounce back year this year. Real quick, before we continue the podcast, a comment from Random Human 92. He said, how do you find these sports insiders to get them on interviews? Well, I don't know if I've ever told this, but went to the Bruce Beck Sports Broadcasting Camp last year, got to speak with Dan on an interview. We talked about pitching injuries, pitching statistics. We had some fun. Was able to keep up with Dan, had him on the show, and the rest is history, and we're very happy to have Dan on here as we continue to preview the MLB season. the best part with Paul Skeens, not to go back to that, but I watched an interview with him and Kate Maniscalco, who's one of kind of the up and coming sports reporters in baseball, and she was able to speak to him at an award show, and she's like, "How many runs would your team need to be up for you to go back to catcher and catch some of the final innings?" And I think he said something like 25 or 30. So while his roots say, with the catcher, I think he's sticking to pitching, and he'll have a fantastic season. As you just said, he'll be a Cy Young candidate. I even want to go back to an earlier question talking about the Dodgers. I think you hit it right on the spot. The main thing that stood out to me, they have a lot of pitching depth. Like, if a starter's not working out, which the starters were fantastic in the Tokyo series, but if the starters aren't playing well, you can go to anyone in that bullpen. I think their bullpen's one of the deepest in Major League Baseball. You just mentioned it, the addition of Tanner Scott, huge for this Dodgers team. However, I think a lot of people, even though I've just won one, I think a lot of people are getting tired of the Dodgers. Like, I just did a poll on my podcast. People are saying that they're not going to repeat as champions. We haven't seen a repeat champion since 2000. And I think the other element, and Dan, I want to hear your thoughts on this. The main thing the Dodgers are doing, yes, they're able to pay everyone, but they're able to defer the money. Like, Shohei Ohtani's grandkids are really going to appreciate the 650 million, 700 million, whatever it is. So is the deferred money good for the game? Like, yes, you're seeing all these stars on one team. They have essentially an all-star lineup and an all-star rotation. But is it good for the game that teams like the Dodgers and Yankees can just pay money recklessly and pay them later down the line and not have to worry about the short term?
Well, I look at it this way. You could point a finger at the Dodgers. You could point a finger at the Yankees. But there are 28 other teams that could do the same thing if they choose to do it, right? I mean, it's really easy to throw darts at the Dodgers, but let's just say hypothetically that something would happen to Ohtani and he would have had an injury, right? Let's say Betts and Freeman wouldn't have worked out. And there are a lot of free agents that sign with teams, and it doesn't always work out. You go back to the 70s and the 80s with the Yankees and George Steinbrenner. He was the evil villain. He signed everybody. Dave Winfield, Ricky Henderson. He went after all the big ticket guys. And when it doesn't work, you're also carrying a big target on your back. So if you're the Dodgers, I commend them for this, Chase. They play in a market where there's a lot of things going on in LA. You've got the Lakers, you've got the Angels, you've got the Rams, you've got the Chargers. You have so many things. You have the ocean, you have the beach, you have San Diego. You have so many different things.
Hollywood, just the entertainment atmosphere. Yeah.
Right. And so they're figuring, okay, how do we keep retaining that entertainment dollar? And the ticket prices are steep. They're packing the place, and their fan base now expects them to win championships. And I give them credit for this, Chase. Yes, they have deep pockets. Yes, they figured out how they can defer the money, but so can other teams. They can choose to do that if they'd like to. Sooner or later, that bill comes due, right? You've got to pay that money, and they're going to have to pay that money. But they've made a commitment to upgrades at Dodger Stadium. Their TV package is a great one. And their fan base, it's a very competitive landscape that they're in with a lot of entertainment dollar, and they want to keep that dollar. And the way for them to do that is to put a championship caliber product on the field year after year after year. So in one way, you can be disappointed if you're a fan of Milwaukee, Cleveland, Detroit, Kansas City, Tampa. But that's part of the price of playing poker in the big leagues. Like the major market teams do have an advantage to signing players. There's no question about that. You can't get around it. But it also takes guts to go out there. And I'm sure you were as shocked as I was 2 years ago. We were hearing Ohtani, 500 million, maybe 600 million, and it went to 700 million. And you look at that deal now, Chase, and I can tell you this, the international money and the international revenue that they're generating from Ohtani, that contract is pretty well taken care of. And so,
and look at the Tokyo series too. Like, think about how big, like, now that's becoming for Major League Baseball, having this a Japanese player, the face of the game.
He is an international star. Think about this. The cheapest ticket at the Tokyo game, nosebleeds, was $1,900 US. Think about that. That's like the price of a World Series, Dodgers, Yankees, Game 7, everything on the line. $1,900 was the cheapest ticket to go to one of those two games against the Cubs.
just think about that. It's unbelievable. Shohei Ohtani is completely changing the game. And I mean, you mentioned it. I think the Dodgers are the most talented team in the league. Whether you like the deferred money or not, I personally do not like the fact that I mean, I don't know if there are any changes that can be made or in the short term at all, but like, I don't like the fact that just the big markets control Major League Baseball. I've never been a fan of that, and that's a whole other conversation to get into it for a different day. But you are right; other teams can do it. The Dodgers have capitalized on this ability to defer money, and now they have a very talented roster. And if they stay healthy, and even if a few guys go down, it's going to be very hard to beat that Dodgers team, especially
Look at it this
in a
way.
best of 5 or best of 7 series in the playoffs.
Look at a lot of the smaller market teams that are able to get that generated revenue because of the luxury tax that the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Red Sox, and the Cubs pay, right? I don't think the smaller teams are going to say, hey, we don't want that 18, 20 million that we're getting from that pool, right? They're taking that money and they can reinvest that money in the team if they choose to do so. So I get what you're saying, but there are a lot of the teams that are the non-competitive teams that are benefiting from it because they're getting some of that revenue that
True.
goes into that pot of the luxury tax.
That's true, and it's a big conversation. You mentioned the Red Sox. They had an incredible offseason in my mind. Yes, we lost Tyler O'Neill to my Baltimore Orioles, but I just think they had a great offseason. Added Garrett Crochet. I think that rotation's unbelievable. Talk to me about the Red Sox a little bit, but also just some of the other big things that stood out to you from this MLB offseason. Of course, we're gonna get to like Juan Soto, but just some other things that maybe a lot of people are talking about that you think really that stood out to you from this offseason.
Two things that have really stuck out to me, and you don't know how it's going to play out during the course of the season. The way that Clay Holmes, if you would have had a crystal ball, and if you would have said to me last year before the World Series, I've got a hot take for you, Dan. Clay Holmes is going to sign with the Mets, and he's going to be a starting pitcher. I would have probably not come on your show again because I would think you were an NBA or an NFL insider. I would have never believed it. That shocked me, and he's taken to it. He had a great grapefruit league. That's the one thing that shocked me. The other thing is, a lot like you go back several years ago when Zach Greinke signed with the Diamondbacks, nobody was linking Corbin Burnes to the Diamondbacks. You were hearing maybe the Yankees, maybe the Red Sox. Were the Dodgers going to be in on that mix? Maybe the Rangers were in on that mix. And out of the blue, out of nowhere, here come the Arizona Diamondbacks, a lot like they did with Zach Greinke. And all of a sudden, it makes them relevant again. This is what I like about the Diamondbacks. I think deep down, they'll never admit it. The chances of them winning the West are slim. But if they get into the postseason like they did 2 years ago, their pitching gets hot at the right time. It goes to show you, if you get in, you've got a chance to do some damage. Go back to Game 4. Padres, Dodgers. Dodgers down 2-1. The Padres had the Dodgers dead. There was everything but the dirt was thrown onto the Dodgers going into the 5th inning of that game, right? And if that would have held up, I doubt that Dave Roberts signs an extension. I doubt that they were going to be as free spending as they were. And we'd look at the Dodgers completely differently now. And you and I would be, look, you spent all that money on Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman. And what did it get you? You got beat by the team 60 miles south of you in San Diego. So,
I mean, just kind of follow up on that point. I mean, I watched that series. The Padres had them. Like, truly, they were the team that competed best with the Dodgers all postseason. They had them dead in the water. You're right.
Think about this. At the trade deadline, the most active team trying to acquire pitching was the Dodgers, who at the beginning of the year had so much pitching, they didn't know what to do with it, right? All of a sudden, they needed to go out and get Jack Flaherty. Think about this. The Tigers traded their second best pitcher because they thought they were out of it, because if they didn't, they would have never moved Flaherty to the Dodgers. So the Dodgers needed Flaherty, and the Tigers were probably looking to 2025. Next thing you know, the Tigers go on a 3-week run that was insane. They get in, the Dodgers get in, they needed Jack Flaherty, and the Dodgers win the whole thing. So the crazy thing is you try to figure it out. The crazy thing about baseball is we can have all these predictions and think we know everything. But during the course of the year, there was a time in early August, the Dodgers were reeling, and people forget about that.
They do. I mean, that's what happens when you're playing a 162-game season. And I think just us as fans and particularly us as media members, we have to entertain fans. And I think the one thing that I'm sure a lot of people often do, they panic and they overreact to quick stretches of games, good or bad. And I think what people have to understand is this is a long season. It's an 162 game season, and you're going to feel the ups and the downs back and forth. And so I think that people will have to start to, I guess you could say, appreciate that you can have a team that's dead in the water in August and a team that can come back or be being beat in a series and they get hot all of a sudden in the middle of the divisional series and go on to win the World Series. It's just baseball is so unpredictable in that way. And then what I find so funny about that Jack Flaherty story, welcome back to Detroit, Jack Flaherty. So it's just like what a crazy sequence that was for the Flaherty family.
Yeah, and you can make a case right now the Tigers might be the team to beat in the AL Central. I know everybody likes sexy pick is the Royals with Bobby Witt Jr., their starting rotation, Cole Reagan, Seth Lugo. You have to like the Royals, and I do like the Royals, but I still think this is the year the Guardians take a step back. They leaned heavily on that bullpen last year. I don't know if they can go to the well and go to that bullpen as early and often as they did last year. I think the Tigers right now, if you were to ask me right now, pick the division winner in the Central, I would slightly take the Tigers over the Royals.
Wow, and it's just we're talking about the unpredictability of this sport and how so many people have so many different thoughts going into the season. And again, there's no really clear-cut answer about any of these teams. I just watched a video today from an analyst who had the Tigers fourth in the AL Central, and I think that just shows you that like I'm more with you. I love this Tigers team, and I think they're here to stay, especially now getting Flaherty back, plus the additions they had and what they did last year. But it's just you never know in Major League Baseball. I want to ask you. We've talked about the offseason. We've talked about a few of them. Is there a team you haven't mentioned yet that you feel like is flying under the radar and that will exceed expectations in 2025?
Yes. Yeah, and I've taken a lot of flack the last week for this. I think the Toronto Blue Jays are my pick to win the AL East. Nobody has a stable of starting pitching in the East. Their starting pitching is far superior to anyone in the East. Far superior.
Okay.
Bowden Francis came alive last year, the second half of the season. Scherzer's had a good spring, has some issues with his thumb. They've got Jose Barrios, a quality pitcher. Bassett is another quality pitcher. Kevin Gausman is a good pitcher. You take those five, hands down, the Toronto Blue Jays 1 through 5, their starting pitching is the best in the East. Now this is the big if Bo Bichette goes back to being Bo Bichette, he's a free agent at the end of the year, as is Vlad Guerrero Jr. If those two guys come back and play like they're capable of, and you think they will in a big year, a contract year, I think the Blue Jays are winning the East. I know they're not the sexy pick, but I'm buying their pitching. And I just think this is my last run of drinking the blue Kool-Aid from the Blue Jays. But I'm not throwing the blue Kool-Aid out. I'm drinking it one more year.
It's a great way of putting it. I feel like what is so interesting about the Blue Jays is a lot of people are picking them fourth or fifth in the AL East. But at the same time, you are right. I'll be the first one to tell you as an Orioles fan, their rotation scares the you-know-what out of me as I go into the season. With Bradish and Rodriguez hurt, you lost Corbin Burns. Zach Eflin's your ace, and then you got Charlie Morton, who's coming out of retirement. Like, I don't really know what's going on there. The Yankees have the injury bug has hit them with Luis Heel and Garrett Cole. And yes, Max Fried should be great. I mean, the Red Sox pitching does seem fine, but you are right. The Blue Jays rotation, if those guys can stay healthy, does seem like a great rotation. I love the addition of Anthony Santander. I think this lineup is deep. I feel like every year we have those conversations about the Toronto Blue Jays, and I do feel like every year there's some sort of disappointment. What do you think has kind of caused, because this team has had so much talent, what's been the reason why they've disappointed over the past few years, and why do you think that's going to change?
A couple of reasons. Last year, Bo Bichette, riddled with injuries, didn't have a very good year. Dalton Varsho, was a little bit better last year, came with high expectations, a guy that's a terrific outfielder, had a good spring training. I think he's going to hit for power. I'd like to see him cut his swing down and put the ball in play a little bit more. It's a team that when you're expected to have a good year and you get into May and June and you're wobbling under 500, your shortstop star player's having a bad year and he's injured, it's easy to go, oh no, here we go again. It's starting again, and it's hard to get out of that. I just think I'm buying the Blue Jays. I'll say this. if the Blue Jays are near the top of the East at the end of May, I think they can sustain. If they get off to a horrific start, let's say at 50 games, they're 20 and 30, and they're 10 games out of it, I think you're going to see if Bo isn't having a good year, they're going to try to move him. They'll move Vlad at the trade deadline if he's having a good year. And then maybe they have to say, okay, maybe our window is over to try to win the East. It's imperative for the Blue Jays to get off to a good start. I think in May, let's say June 1st, the Blue Jays are 7-8 games over 500. They're right in the thick of it. I think they'll be in it to the end. I just don't know if the Yankees have enough starting pitching. I don't know if the Red Sox have enough starting pitching. They brought in Garrett Crochet, who everybody wanted last year at the trade deadline. They gave up a good package to the White Sox to get him. They're the sexy pick. I like them. They're a vastly improved team. Maybe their best signing last year was signing Alex Cora to an extension. Great manager. I think he's one of the top 5 in baseball. His deal was up. They locked him up to a multi-year deal. Things are getting better. Jared Duran is a terrific player. I mean, he kind of flies under the radar. He's a 5-tool guy. Hit, run, throw, hit for average, hit for power. He can run. He can do a lot of things. Red Sox are a dangerous team. If they can keep Tristan Costas healthy, they brought in Bregman. Devers looks like he's going to be doing most of the DHing. They're going to score runs. They're a good team.
Yes, they are. I think, honestly, I wouldn't even have the Blue Jays in that conversation. I don't think it is going to work out with Toronto. I understand your logic, but to me, I think it's going to be the Orioles, Red Sox, and Yankees right there, separated by 10 games max kind of in the season, maybe less. I think that the separation between one, and then even if the Blue Jays play mediocre baseball, I think the difference between 1 and 4 is not going to be as large as it usually is in the division. I think that's a division up for grabs, as you did say, because there's just so much inconsistency there. I know we don't have much time. Real quick, before we start to get into like predictions of some of the major teams, who's a team with a lot of hype currently that you're not buying?
Baltimore Orioles. Don't like their starting pitching. I don't think they have enough depth. I like that they've got the big fella Bautista back. So with Bautista and Cano, the 8th and 9th inning should be taken care of. I don't think they have enough depth in the starting rotation. Love the lineup. It's hard for me to argue with you or get into a fight about their lineup. They might have the best collection of good young players, position players in the game of baseball. Will Adley Rutschman bounce back? Had a miserable last 6 weeks. I think he will. I'm just not buying the pitching. I thought this was the winter to keep Burns or to go out there and go get somebody. I don't know whether that was Blake Snell and or Burns, but they lost both. And I don't think the replacements for Corbin Burns they were able to get in the winter. And I think that's going to be a big loss for the Orioles.
There's just so much unknowns. Kyle Gibson, Tomoyuki Sugano, Charlie Morton. These guys are 35 plus years old, but their best years behind them. Like you can't rely on those guys in your starting rotation and expect to be a World Series contender. To me, I think Baltimore's best hope if you can get Rodriguez and Bradish fully healthy by the time you reach the postseason. And then to me, you can always find an unsung hero for the first half of the year. Like the one year Tyler Wells for Baltimore was an all-star caliber pitcher before falling off a cliff. I think that's honestly their best hope, is hoping that one of those guys can pan out for at least half the season before Rodriguez and Bradish can return.
Keep your fingers crossed.
I will. But you are right. I mean, the lineup's going to be fun. The pitching is concerning. Yes. Who knows how Bautista is going to do returning from a really serious Tommy John surgery. And reports are saying his velocity is not as high as it used to be. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. Real quick, I want to talk about New York teams before we get into it. Jack Manno, one of our top viewers, he wrote, World Series winner equals Yankees. We'll have to see about that. A diehard Yankee fan. And Jack, shout out to him for viewing here. As I kind of told you before, I kind of think of it as like the New York trading thing between Juan Soto and Clay Holmes both going to the Mets. The Yankees, though, I think they have one of their deepest lineups in the Aaron Judge era. The injury bug has hit them. The Mets starting pitching still concerns me. What are your thoughts on the two subway teams and how they'll play in 2020?
I like the Mets. Soto is a great addition. I'm scared about the starting pitching, but not Montas. Montas is going to be out a little bit longer than Minaya. I was surprised they didn't bring Quintana back. I thought he was terrific for them down the stretch last year. I'm worried about the starting pitching if they have enough. You always worry at the back end with Diaz. Which guy are you going to get? Are you going to get the guy that's filthy and lockdown or the guy that's inconsistent? We don't know which guy. Yankees, think about this. The Yankees went into spring training not sure what they were going to do with Marcus Stroman. He didn't want to pitch out of the bullpen. He made that very, very well known right off the get-go. He went from being number 6 to number 3 in the starting rotation. Max Fried has had a history of spending pockets on the injured list. They're banking on that. This is the formula for the Yankees. Have a lead and get to that bullpen, because with Luke Weaver and Devin Williams, it might be the best 1-2 combination. If not, you can make the case Kate Smith and Clase with the Guardians. I just don't think the Yankees have enough starting pitching, but maybe, just maybe, that pitcher that's an impact guy isn't on the roster now. They're going to have to go acquire that guy once the season starts.
It sure will be interesting. They'll be competing with Baltimore, Boston, and according to you, Toronto.
I'm going to give you one guy, Chase, to look out for if he's healthy that could help a team. Sandy Alcantara, back healthy again with the Marlins. The Marlins aren't winning the East. They're in rebuild mode. And if Alcantara can show that he's healthy and take the ball every 5 days, you can bet teams, they're not going to be kicking the tires. They'll be knocking down the door to try to get a hold of him.
We'll keep an eye on that name for sure. A lot of great teams to just kind of pay attention to here as we're kind of ending this season. My thoughts on the Mets, the sexy opinion is, oh yeah, they made the NLCS last year and they added one of the top 5 players in the sport. The same concerns for me rest with the starting pitching. And I also think there was an element last season, he's not there anymore, which is unfortunate because it was such a fun energy, but it was the OMG, Jose Iglesias, Apple going up in the sky, Citi Field energy, and it felt like in those final few months, everything went their way. The roles, the injury bug, the pitching got hot at the right time. It just felt like the stars aligned for the Mets to get there. And if the stars don't align again, even with adding Juan Soto, I think the rest of the roster isn't as great as it was last year. And who knows, again, with injuries, that's always a question mark. So we'll have to see what happens. I think a lot of people are higher on the Mets than I am. Real quick, before we get into who you really think is going to win, I think the Mets are actually a great team to talk about as we head into this topic. How many true contenders do you believe there are in Major League Baseball? Like, how many teams do you really, can you envision this MLB season winning it all? I think I have 4 or 5 teams where I feel really passionate that they can win it all this year, and then a few are kind of on the bubble of that category.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say the Phillies and Braves and Dodgers out of the NL. You could probably make a case and throw the Diamondbacks in that discussion too. I don't think there's anybody that scares anyone in the NL Central. So I would say you're looking Diamondbacks, Dodgers, Phillies, Braves, maybe put the Mets into that equation. And you flip over to the AL, you could go Red Sox, Yankees, Blue Jays. Those to me seem like the logical picks in the East. You look at the Central, and it's probably going to be Kansas City or Detroit. I don't think either one are legitimate, like they can win the whole thing. You look out on the West, if Jacob deGrom is healthy, the Rangers stock goes way up. If the Mariners hit, love their starting pitching. I agree with you. There's probably 7 legitimate teams that can win it all, but the Dodgers right now, they're in an island by themselves.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm even going to limit that list further. In terms to me of the really top contenders in this sport, Atlanta when healthy, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, pass up on everyone else in the NL for a second. The Yankees are the reigning AL champions. You have to put them on there. I think the Rangers went healthy. I think last year they were hurt, but you're going to see now Wyatt Langford, a great Wyatt Langford, Josh Young healthy again with the core that helped them win a World Series, not last year, but the year before in 2023, and that team got hot at the right time. I think the Rangers are in that category, and then maybe you want to add another team. I think it depends if Baltimore can get hot or Toronto or Boston. Let's see what the Royals and Tigers are capable of. As you said, who knows? I'm not saying for a World Series, but if the Twins get healthy, who knows what they're capable of? We've seen them be a division winner in previous years. Dan, do we still got you? I saw your screen's black. Unfortunately here, I think we may have lost.
Sorry about that. Did I lose you for a second?
I think we lost you for a second. You back? Can you hear me? Facing some technical difficulties here. Dan, going once. Going twice. I think we can hear Dan. I'm not sure if Dan can hear us.
I think
Dan,
I lost you, Chase.
You got me? Mic check. Going once. Going twice. Technical difficulties on the live. Dan, do we got you? Do you copy?
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, let's do it. You're back. I don't know when you lost me there, but for me, I think the Rangers, Yankees, those are like the two main contenders I really love. And then maybe a Boston or Baltimore or another team that can get in there if they're healthy and get hot. And then I think, as you said, the Phillies, Braves, and Dodgers over on the National League side. It's going to be a great MLB season. We're so excited for it. It starts in a few days. Dan, we know you. We really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously, tight schedule with the MLB season just a few days away. So again, we really appreciate you doing this. For the audience, stay tuned for more MLB season preview coverage. You don't think you're going to be able to get off the books, though, without giving a World Series prediction, right? Who's winning it and over who in the World Series in 2025, if you had to make a preseason prediction?
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of travel for me late October going between Toronto and Los Angeles. Blue Jays, wow. Dodgers in the World Series. The Blue Jays win their third World Series. Back-to-back in 92, 93. And somehow, some way, Kevin Gausman's going to pitch the game of his life in Game 6. Blue Jays, Dodgers, World Series.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I heard the AL East thing. I didn't know how far you go with it. Wow.
Oh, I'm all in. I have about 5 cases of the blue Kool-Aid from the Blue Jays. If you'd like me to send some, I'll FedEx you one overnight.
You were right now. I feel like it's like you're picking a 9th seed to win the national championship in March Madness. You are just going for it. I love it. I love it, Dan. Awesome. If Toronto does it, I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to say never trust a different analyst again.
Bingo.
We'll see what happens. I think it'll be a fun MLB season. Dan, Plesac, we really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and coming live here on the show. I'm sorry we kind of had a little bit of a breakup with the internet toward the end, but we're so glad you were able to come on and really enjoyed speaking with you.
Sounds good, Chase. Be good.
Thank you. I'll try to be. Of course, you're always welcome on any time. The fans love you. We got some great viewership for this episode. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Alongside Dan Plesac and MLB Network Analyst, please be sure to check out MLB Central, all the great shows Dan is on with the MLB Network. And it's only going to get better as we start the MLB season. So alongside Dan Plesac, I am your host, Chase Coburn, signing off live from Chase's Sports News. Stay tuned for more MLB coverage as we preview the season opening day beginning in just 2 days. Dan, thank you so much. I'm your host, Chase Coburn, signing off from Chase's Sports News. Take care and happy baseball.